Hello, ballers, and welcome back to our final review of 2 Point Museum, man. 50 plus hours in, and probably another 50 off stream will take place with this game. I love it. I am such a fan of the 2 Point series. Obviously, I mentioned in previous videos, 2 Point Campus didn't do it for me, but 2 Point Museum absolutely does. Is it perfect? No, but goddamn, man, is it an addictive, it's one of those games where you just want more and more and more, and you need 5 more minutes, you need 5 more minutes, you need 5 more minutes, you need 5 more minutes. It actually turned out, as we get into this finale here, how I concluded my stream playthrough. As I said, I'm going to carry on this at home because it's a good, it's a several 100-hour game. Was kind of serendipity, I guess, is there was one museum we hadn't touched, which was in the Frozen Mountains. And that, I think, it actually is the final map. It's actually the big, nasty map of the game. That might not be true. There is other things to do, but based on the evidence I can see, such as we have capped out the actual required story-based star ratings for all the museums, which is 5 stars. Yet the game does continue past there to 6, 7, maybe even up to 10 stars, but they're sort of like stretch goals is what I would describe it as. They're more like, oh, you can keep going and we'll keep giving you sort of like tougher and tougher things to do, but it's not actually going to do much because you've discovered a bunch of stuff. So this map was really hard. You start with 0 money, 0 buildings, and you have to take out a loan, and you have to sort of build up from literally nothing while having huge debt to get your museum going, which once you resolve, which takes, a couple of hours, 3 hours or whatever, is like, okay, now we're profitable, the loans are paid off, now the museum's functioning like a normal museum, is it then expands into creating a super museum. And a super museum in this game involves many, many different themes. You have to attract people from all over the place, so you can't just focus on, say, prehistoric artifacts, dinosaurs and fossils and things. You're also going to need an aquarium. You're going to need probably spooky ghost things. You're going to need science stuff, all that kind of thing. Now, I made what I would probably consider to be an error here, but it made sense to us at the time. It didn't see that way. It's, upon reflection, we probably shouldn't have done this, but it kind of worked out well. Is there on the expeditions where you go and collect your exhibits for different themes. So there's like the Netherworld. That's where you're going to get your spooky stuff. Then there's like underwater caverns and things. You're going to get your fish and mermaids and things from there. Etc. etc. There was one we hadn't touched yet because I believe it was like a DLC that was added at some point or some addition, and it's called Fantasyland. And fantasy is, goblins, dragons, things like that. And we had never touched that because previously the museums were themed very specifically. Like the museum that's near the bay is going to be the marine one. The museum that's in the toxic wasteland is going to give you that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, let's do fantasy as well, because we've discovered, I would guess, like 60% of everywhere else. We've done that, but we haven't done anything over here, and plus, I like fantasy stuff. I want some ogres and orcs and things like that to go along with our little museum here. So I was like, okay, we'll pivot, because I started with prehistoric, because that's the cheap stuff, because we had no money. I said, we'll pivot over to fantasy now. This was a whole other game. Your fantasy experts need leveling. They have RPG stats, dex, strength, intellect. You have to spec them out. They have little attribute points that you can spend on them. Then there's gear. You can gear them up. They get like Zelda wing boots. They get crowns. They get Thor's hammer, which gives them big stat bonuses to counter some of the fantastical things that are out there. And then you have actual boss fights against a giant dragon, which is like Smaug, which ultimately destroys various places. So other places you've explored will get destroyed when the dragon moves and breathes fire on it, and you have to go and solve that. And then ultimately there's a finale fight once you've really explored against the Dragon King, which is like the ultimate final boss fight of this area. So very fun what was going on there. Very, very fun. So off I went and I did that. I will say the fantasy is the only area I completely explored, because I figured if some things were missing that I would like to see, which I mentioned in a previous video, such as like giant krakens, sea monsters, Loch Ness monsters, things like that in the marine area, the fantasy area will definitely have those things, like, because that's the big addition. So if we fully explore this map, and I had a tiebreaker decision to make because it got to the point where to find or to unlock the final sort of fantasy areas, you can't do it with just fantasy people. You now need to have a fully established marine life area and experts that go along with that with full training. You can't just hire like, oh, this guy's an expert in marine and go on the mission. That doesn't work. They need full training with various specific attributes in order to survive these missions. And then we needed to do it with ghosts as well, the supernatural, to find out what was going on over there. So this was like the final 3 things we had to do were really tough. I will say everything leading up to this was really, really fun. We got everything in the fantasy world from, again, mythical gear, which was really nice, wizard hats and all that kind of stuff, which we got to put on our stuff. Like the wing boots make you super fast, so I had my security like zooming all over the museum. Great to see, really visually fun, as the whole game is. And then we got what was the coolest things we got? The coolest thing I think we got is Dwarven technology. When we started raiding the Dwarven mines, is we started to get machinery that was seemingly connected. It kept mentioning the smelting device, and we started to find geodes of rocks of various different types, like earth and fire and water geodes. And then we started finding these bits of machinery. Previously in the game, there has been machinery that needs to link up with other machinery to form like the final product, and you have to figure that out yourself. And it's been denoted by having these very clear symbols on it, like triangles and circles and things. That was in the science area, the space area. That was very noticeable. This didn't have that, but it did mention the same sort of thing in the description. So we were like, huh, this kind of looks like it goes together in some way, shape, or form. Like, what is it? Because I think it ultimately ends up being 6 pieces of equipment from different maps in order to get this thing working. So every time we got a new piece, like we got piece number 4, we like stuck it all together and nothing happened. And then we got the 5th piece, nothing happened. And we're like, what is this thing? It's weird. Then we eventually, about 2 maps later, got another piece. And it mentioned the smelter. And we were like, okay, here's another piece. So I had this empty area of the museum, so I stuck it all together. Lo and behold, it activated. What is it? What is this thing that we've been getting? Well, this is 3 sort of bellows. One does fire, water, and earth bellows, which blow into it. Then you have a machine that captures the gas from rotting cheese and injects that into it, which then causes this bowl to actually bend over, and it's an arse. And shoot fire out of its butthole, I'm not joking, into this huge block, which then opens up like a receiver. So you've built this giant fart burning machine, this giant fart forge, so to speak. I'm like, well, what is this for? And they were like, the geodes. And then we put the geodes in it, and sure enough, it like encapsulates them, it drags them down, and then opens up into the actual crystalline, no rock form of these geodes to make pure water, pure earth, pure fire. Which are much better display artifacts for your museum, and then you can collect those and process them and do all this kind of stuff. But it was all that kind of stuff is so fun, along with all the silly things that go with it, like Excalibur. They had a lot of memes in there as well. They had like the Iron Throne is what you could find, things like that. They really expanded on it. I would say there's probably like 70 different artifacts to be found. But then we got to the end game where we'd beaten 5 stars, so quote-unquote, the story of the museum is done. We found the curator. You have to defrost him. You have to put him... He's like frozen. You can make him into an exhibit if you want to, but it does say melt him. So we stuck him in a little room with heaters to melt him down, and then he pops out, and then he like becomes one of the best trained members of your staff and works at the hospital, at the museum, and gets on with things. But then we got to this was the crunch point. I had 3 areas left to do, which required entire revamps of the museum to get the staff to do it. Or we could move on to a different map and just kind of see what the ghosts do, because we've got like 60%, another 40, maybe 50% to explore there. That might get wacky. Go back to the marine. I wanted to do that. And it was really bothering me. I took this decision for maybe 5 minutes or so. And I was like, you know what? I need to know what the end game is here. I need to know. Like, let's fully explore this map. Let's see what the actual secrets are. We've defeated the Dragon King, which gave us a big crown, and also allowed us to create this enormous dragon skeleton in the thing. Not a living, breathing one, a giant one. And so we did that. This took another couple of hours to do. It was hard. It was very, very difficult to do. Extraordinarily expensive in terms of in-game money. Like, really dropping from... I think at one point we were at, like, $750,000, and then after like just a few minutes of processing this, we were down to like 200K, like a huge monetarily investment. I ended up with 3 helicopters working non-stop to keep this process working as to what we needed to do. And we did it. What did we get for like all this extra effort? Well, one of them was ghost goblins. All right, cool, but little goblins. And that was the only reward. These are like, I guess you would say they're just like bonus rewards for doing everything. So it wasn't spectacular. I think one of the other, what we did finally get mermaids, but they're reversed and they're called fish people, which you can put into fish tanks. And I'll be honest, I can't even remember what the other one was. That we did get something else, but I literally can't remember. And that's kind of the point I was at with the other video. My suspicions came true, is that the very, very end game doesn't get wacky enough for me. I really did want to see them say, you've made it here, you love the game, let's get real silly with it and have you find real dragons. Certainly in a fantasy land, you could see things like krakens making a lot of sense, right? To find that in the deepest of oceans and things there. And again, they may exist if you do a different, like the entire marine area. I'll find out later and maybe do an update video when I'm going to play it at home from now on. But I suspect not, given this is the end of the fantasy area. I suspect that's not the case. And man, I want it. I want it because I love this game. And one, I would say, once you're like a good 50, 60 hours into the game, it does fall into a bit of a trap at the end, where your management of the museum is now secondary to acquisition of expeditions, which is a little laborious towards the end. Certainly when you're at the point where you're managing like 3 expeditions, which is where you want to be to keep this ball rolling. You can slow roll it, sure, but you want to keep it going. But once you know how to sort of set out a museum that's relatively efficient, that is working hard, you know the resources that are needed, there's less and less incentive to actually monitor the museum side of things and more incentive to just monitor expeditions, because the main focus at the very end game is, one, collecting new exhibits from hard to do areas, which means you need to do very specific training. You need to get very specific members of staff. You need to make sure they're healthy. They might get cursed. They might get very sick because you simply can't counter them. Or you make choices that they won't counter them because it's better to actually remove the curse by sending them to the netherworld or to a spa to get healed up, get them back, and keep them out collecting more. And also the acquisition of knowledge. So you want to collect new exhibits, but each one of those also comes with a knowledge value. And the only way you increase that knowledge value is to collect that exhibit again and then process it in an analysis room, which will then increase your knowledge. And that, by proxy, makes your museum wildly more successful because your guests are learning everything possible about these exhibits, right? So it's a case of like, oh, this is a dragon. We don't know much about it, all the way to this is Billy the dragon. He lived for this, you know, that kind of idea. I get it, makes sense. But what I was hoping to see was, I want to be more excited about the exhibits I get. I was on occasion, like getting the Iron Throne was very funny, you know, like, ah, cool, the Iron Throne. And unlocking more and more stuff. That's just getting wild. I want it to escalate a bit more. That's the only thing I would say. But does that detract from how good this game is in its base form? Absolutely not, man. Absolutely not. Like, this is, for me, this is a joy. An absolute joy, because you end up in so many scenarios, and many of you will be familiar with this, where because you don't know the end game, once you reach there, you look back and you're like, okay, I need to revamp the entire thing. Like, I want to nuke it from orbit, start again with all the stuff I have, and then rebuild it into a beautiful, wonderful thing. What I will say about that, though, from what I can tell, it really doesn't matter too much. Like, as long as it's functional and tours are happening and people can move around and they're not getting trapped, is when you add, like, additional buildings, even though your logic tells you, like, oh, this would be a really awkward pathway through a museum. Is if I was to be, like, snaked this way, but then I'd have to go over here, then come back out, and then go up here and go do that. It's kind of fine. As long as everything's entertaining, they get plenty of energy, there's food regularly, there's good toilet utilities. People will just hang around and go and visit everything regardless. Like, the whole point is to make things exciting, and people will go anyway. Although your brain is telling you, like, that's probably just really annoying if I went to a place that was stationed like this. If I think about even the Vatican, or very old school style museums, which is essentially what it is, most of the time they're trying to lead you on a pathway that makes sure you see everything, right? So they're trying to like, oh, if you go this way, you will end, if you start here, you end up at the Sistine Chapel, and then you'll come through all these like magnificent artifacts and things like that. That doesn't super matter here. And I think that's okay, actually. I think that's fine. Although my brain was like, oh, I could decorate this and station it out much better, which would be something people want for, like, the perfect museum. The game is quite relaxed on it. It's like, no, as long as your stuff is, like, good and exciting and interesting, then people will go. They'll find their way there. Don't worry about it too much. And that's put to the highlight in one of the most difficult objectives I had to meet, which was you have to get some of your guests' knowledge to something absurd like 300 knowledge. That's absolutely crazy. Most exhibits give 1 knowledge, some of them 2, some of them 3. So you need a lot of stuff to reach that. And you're like, okay, I'm really worried now that people aren't going to go to all my different areas where I've got different exhibits. They did. And they started getting it, and it was fine. It was totally fine. So you're like, okay, this is all good. It takes a while, but like they'll get there and get it done. My ultimate conclusion here is if this is even remotely tempting, or you had so much fun with you played 2 Point Hospital and you liked it, and you didn't like 2 Point Campus like me, or you're an old head and you played Theme Hospital and all those kind of games from Bullfrog. I remember saying Westwood, which are involved somewhere, but Bullfrog primarily. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. And my only advice, the devs were watching our playthrough. Get real weird with it at the end. Like, if there's going to be 2 Point Zoo or whatever is the next iteration on this series, really get silly with it by the end. Because you've already gone that far, right? You've already got space and the nether and fantasy and orcs and all that kind of stuff. You've already made it silly. Go further. I would have loved nothing more than by the end of the fantasy stuff to actually have a dragon in an area. Just walking around, like creating pens and things like that. I would love to make an aquarium that's an entire building because it's got to house this monstrous sea serpent, right? That does cool things. Like, those are what I want to see by the end of this. Really get silly with it. Give me some sort of goal. And again, I come back to that Command & Conquer. Is like, I wanted to play that game for a long time because I wanted mammoth tanks. Like, that end goal, I was like, oh, dude, I totally want that. Start small and just go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger with it. And that creates more actual gameplay options. I had this with the dragon. The dragon artifact is so huge. It's a skeleton, but it's so huge. You've got to rearrange and fix up your base. That detracts from, like, the expedition stuff. I actually have stuff to do in the museum that matters to make this whole thing work. And go back to the actual design stuff. So that would be what I'd say. But we're going to leave it there stream-wise. My game plan right now is a bit of a one-day banger. Let's have another palette refresher before we play a little bit of World of Warcraft. New patches coming. We're going to play ourselves some World of Warcraft. We've obviously got some FF14 coming. And then we're back to Ichiban's Tales, my friends. So it's going to be a very exciting time on stream and hopefully on the TDP. So I'll see you then. Bye, guys.